All right, guys, welcome. I apologize. The last video is killed. Probably some of you guys are going to watch this later thinking that it should be on the other video. Once again, I want to thank my two guests for joining us, Mr. Aron Ra and John Fisher. Tonight's conversation will be about morality. Aron, if you don't mind, we figured John could kind of lay out his argument because he has the positive, and then you can critique it from there. Once
There's
again,
a positive? That means there's a negative, and that's me?
Yeah, I mean,
I wasn't aware that this was a debate.
It's not.
No.
So basically, I'm going to start off by just outlining something I want to discuss in terms of morality, and I want you to interact with where I'm coming from, and that way we have more of a discussion that's back and forth in two-way. Think of it, right. So I want to first start off by pointing out a few things on my end. One, this discussion is not about whether or not atheists can be moral with or without God's existence. I think that is a silly point to argue because as religious people, we would probably want an idea of an atheist who does know right and wrong precisely because of the fact that they acknowledge their actions and they know that it's something they can be blamed for and praised for. And furthermore, atheists live great moral lives, and many of them live lives that put religious peoples to shame. Think of someone like Peter Singer. This is a man who donates a lot of his time, effort, and money to helping people in the developing world. And in light of that, in light of just personal practice, to say that an atheist requires moral truths in order to practice morality is also silly. I think that making those aspects of moral discussion ends up in obfuscation, and it just kills the discourse. So I don't think we should do that. But rather, I think what we should discuss is what exactly our moral obligations entail for one another, and do they make sense, and are they consistent when we consider them together? So I just want to first get that out of the way. And Aron, is there anything you'd probably like to pick out already, or is there anything you'd like to agree with in my opening?
First of all, it's Aron, please. I know we
Aron.
have this,
I got it right in the prior discussion. I was like Aron, and now I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I find it strange that morality keeps coming up when we're discussing atheism versus theism, and the reason that I find it strange is because I don't understand why so many believers have the false impression that that belief means moral, and that non-belief means immoral, but both the Bible and the Quran do seem to spell that out. The Quran far more explicitly.
I can't judge the Quran because I haven't read it, and I want to be very charitable to my Muslim friends and brothers. Before I critique a religion, I do want to look at its documentation, so I'll be silent.
There are many times that the Quran says that believing is doing good, and disbelieving is... If a disbeliever is an evildoer, and evildoing is not believing. They're synonymous.
Well, right. So I'm just going to look at it from my tradition. I believe that when it comes to moral truths, God actually gives everybody reason. An atheist has reason just like a theist does. And an atheist also has a moral intuition and conscience just like a believer does. Even our Bible commits us to that belief because it says God writes the law into our own heart. Now, whether or not you agree with that as an atheist, the point is we both seem to agree that the other person has a moral conscience and reason that we could appeal to and we could have discussion about. And I think we should probably start off with that, just acknowledging that we just have the fundamental basis to even reason about this stuff in the first place, whether you're an atheist or a theist. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's fair, as you said before, that there are atheists who live admirable lives as far as morality goes, and there are plenty of Christians that I know I could point to that lots of other Christians would say, yeah, we don't want to talk about that one, and there are some pretty damning statistics as well. So what it really comes down to is whether you're a moral or an immoral person has exactly nothing to do with whether you believe in God or not.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to talk about is why people have this weird idea that it does. I mean, one of the strange ideas that a lot of believers have is that when they tell me that the only reason that they're not out raping and pillaging and vandalizing right now is because of their fear of God.
Yeah. So in light of that, we have to assess something very important. What motivates someone to do the good, and what motivates someone not to do good? And when it comes to it, we start off at like a fundamental basis as children that we do good and avoid evil because of carrots and sticks. It's the consequences of the action. And someone who outlines that sort of morality that you discussed is someone who says, look, the only reason I follow the law and I don't hurt other people is because I don't want to be messed with right back. Like, it's a very self-interested Ayn Randian, which is fairly atheistic, way of viewing morality too. So it's not something religious people would have a monopoly on. In my mind,
there's a lot of atheists that would look at Ayn Rand the same way as you would look at some of the other,
exactly,
the more egregious Christian examples I could think of.
so we both have our black sheep. I'm glad there's some bridge being built on this one, and I think that when you start off there, morality, it might be a good start if you're just starting out, like as a child. So when you're a child, you're not really capable of reason. So what does an adult do in terms of telling you to brush their teeth? They'll tell you to brush your teeth. You might give some reasons why, but also you'll emphasize some losses and gains from doing it. So for example, you get caught not doing it, you might get grounded, some privilege is taken away from you. But at this stage, the child is developing to a point where as soon as they begin to reason, you could give arguments, and it becomes easier for them to actually follow reason rather than, fall into the temptation of immoderation or laxity, where you just don't care even for the good reasons that you just want to go to bed early or stay up and just ignore your dental hygiene. So it allows you to focus on those reasons because you instill some good habits. But unless those habits are instilled, unless you show people why a moral ought is a good thing to obey, then you just get caught up in that carrot stick mindset. And I think you have to build up from there. And I think this is where it gets us to what morality is in terms of well-being of other people, and also building up of happiness for yourself and others as well. So the obligations you have to one another and thinking about one another and even empathizing with one another. I think that's where the basis of moral building should start off with.
I don't know. It's sounding pretty leftist so far.
Oh,
helping out other people. When you come into the quandary of, do you care about other people's rights, or are you only concerned about your own privilege? No, we're on that.
Right. So
there was a video done called Republican Jesus or GOP Jesus, which I thought was hilarious because it's like Jesus saying the Republican talking points that are exactly opposite of the things that Jesus actually taught, where they lead in with the exact line. So you recognize what should be coming next, but then it doesn't. So then it turns into something completely different.
I do agree that there is a terrible end of politicizing religious viewpoints. And like, I have a very difficult time believing, for example, that I'm a Canadian, so maybe it's different. I have a difficult time believing that healthcare, which is completely privatized, is, sort of following in the path of healing others, caring about the other as an individual rather than profitizing off of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I could see how political viewpoints might bleed into it, but yeah, I don't really want to focus on that too much. I do want to talk about moral motivation and the obligations we have to each other, just to start off with.
Well, okay, if we could then, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I mean, I get constant questions. I mean, I get a couple of questions constantly is what I mean to say. Whenever I talk to somebody that, this is the first time they've ever realized that they're talking to an atheist, they say, like, where do you get your morality from? And then they say that we as Christians believe in an objective moral standard, and you atheists think that everything is relative. And I think they've got that backwards, actually. I think the Christian perspective of morality is actually subjective, because it's the opinion of somebody who's speaking for God's opinion. In either case, it's an opinion. We're not given a reason why this is moral or that is not. If we had a reason why, then we could look at it objectively. But we don't get that. We're getting because I told you so.
What if I give you a reason that doesn't need to go into that? So, for example, do you know of the Muslim philosopher Ibn Sina or Avicenna? He when he was defending the law of non-contradiction, that something cannot be P and not P at the same time, like he can't give you an empirical proof of that. All he would say is, look, anyone who believes that contradictions can exist should be beaten and burned until they agree that to be beaten is not the same as to not be beaten, and to be burned is not the same as to not be burned. Now that might sound, very medieval and seditious, but all he's really saying is, look, there are obvious principles we all have to assume, just starting into the fact that are obvious to our face. And if you're not going to believe that, you can't even believe in, your basic experiences to begin with, such as the excruciating pain of getting beaten and burned. And I think that that's pretty much a good place to start in terms of, epistemology. Just what are the foundational aspects of what we need to believe to even get any sort of knowledge or discourse off the ground? I think the law of non-contradiction is one. And I think that there are certain moral claims that are so obvious that I don't need to argue for them. So, for example, if I started beating and burning you, and you were to deny objective morality, your response wouldn't be, no, you're not making me happy, or no, you're mean, or no, this isn't a relationship preference. It would be, no, stop, you're beating, you're burning me, stop it, you ought not do. And I think if I was thrown in as a theist, I would say that too. I would say, no, stop, you oughtn't do this. Like, as soon as you start denying some sort of objective basis, I think that's when it derails. I think that certain moral claims are just so obvious that we can just begin from there. They're just foundational, just like the law of logic is. Well,
there are some things that everybody agrees on for reasons, that we have objective reasons. That if I walk up and I punch some little old lady in the street and I steal her purse just because I can, everybody everywhere accepts that that's immoral. That's not a subjective opinion. That's everybody knows why that's immoral. That's an objective standard.
Right.
But when people give me their religious things about when they say they have what they call an objective standard, is it whatever God says? Well, first of all, they don't have what God says. They have what people say that God says. Mm-hmm. And the people of this religion says God says one thing, and the people of that denomination says God says something else. Is it okay to dance? Is it not okay to dance? Mm-hmm. Should we kill the infidels? Well, the Christians and the Muslims both agree on that one, but there's a whole lot of other religions that say no, you shouldn't.
So if you want my personal opinion, I'm against dancing, because dancing leads to kissing leads to hugging leads to sex, and sex just leads to more dancing. So it's obviously wrong. But
okay. But yeah, I never understood why morality had to be centered around sex, as opposed to something that I think is more basic, which is lies and violence. And I put lies and violence in the same category. What believers will often hit me with is, if you're not religious, you don't believe in God, then what's wrong with lying?
Right.
And I find it funny that apologists always ask me what's wrong with lying, because they know they base their arguments on lies. They depend on it.
All right.
And so they will come up with excuses for why lying is justified.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, to me. Lying and violence are in the same category, in that there's something that you maybe as a last resort of desperate self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be excusable even then.
Right. Yeah. So in terms of lying, like, you could probably see why someone would lie if they're faced with a Nazi, for example, and the Nazi asks if there are any Jews hiding. So you might, raise an exception for lying in that situation. But yeah. I think in terms of talking about obligations, because I think we both agree we have obligations to one another, that maybe we should start off here. Like, would you agree? Would you agree with the following? If we ought to do something, it means we can. So, for example, let's say you're at the beach, you don't know how to swim, your friend is drowning. Given that you don't know how to swim and no one else is there, would you just jump right in and try to save him, despite the fact that you don't know how to swim at that point?
Desperate times call for desperate measures. It would have to be up to my judgment. Now, I know someone who can't swim. Mm-hmm. And if she were to jump in to save somebody else, then you're just going to have two people to save.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the biggest factors in obligation is knowing what you can and can't do. And it's not rational to expect someone who can't do something to do something. And I think if we start off there, we have, kind of a place where we could both start off. And by the way, I am going through a thought process that I hope gets us, that I would say gets us to it is reasonable to believe in God, but I want to say that this conclusion doesn't force discernment. Like, you could be rational and disagree with my argument.
Yeah, but before we begin, we really have
Right.
to answer the other question that I always get, is where do you get your morality from?
I think
And
it's
I get my morality from the same place you do, same place everybody does. Christians think they get the morality from someplace else, but actually they get it from the same place as all atheists do.
Oh, I agree.
We get our morality from our evolution as a social species.
All right.
And I did a series of videos called The Systematic Classification of Life. Episode 49 of that explains this in a little bit more detail. But when you live in a society of people,
mm-hmm.
and you all have to interact with each other, and you depend on society. No man is an island. We cannot be like the tiger and be alone in the wilderness, for all the time. We need other people around us in order to survive. We all need to collaborate our jobs and duties. Here, you take care of this, I'll take care of that. We'll both be good together if we both do our
mm-hmm.
share, that sort of thing. And you very quickly come into a situation where when somebody is not doing their job,
right,
that person is not trusted. That
mm-hmm.
person is denigrated. Well, somebody
right.
who goes out of their way and is obviously showing empathy for other people, that person is celebrated. That person is rewarded. That person is endeared. He gets actual love and respect. And so now to think about population mechanics, generations mm-hmm. down the road, the people who don't keep their word, the people who don't have empathy, the people who have, let's say, dysfunctional mirror neurons or underdeveloped frontal lobes, whatever. Mm-hmm. They don't care about other people. They only care about themselves. Those people tend to be removed from society, either being by being banished, imprisoned, or killed.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas those people who actually do care about other
mm-hmm.
people end up being the most prolific. So we end up having a natural empathy for our family, friends, and fellows. And the most respected people are the ones who do their work, the ones who go out of their way to take care of other people, and the ones who keep their word, mm-hmm. the ones who are honest, the ones that we can trust and rely on. So that's where our morality comes from.
Okay. So believe it or not, my no point I'm going to raise is actually in contradiction to anything you just said. I could accept it just as well as you can. And now, granted, I would have to say that God is the one guiding all that stuff, but it doesn't really matter, because as long as we both agree that the mechanisms originate obligations to ourselves and others, then that's fine by me. And I think we can both go forward with that. Does that sound fair? All right.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
So we both agree that if we ought to do something, then we can do it. It's a necessary condition that if you're obliged to do something, it means you can do it. And would you say that we ought to fulfill all our moral obligation to the best of our abilities? Would you agree with me on that one?
I'm not sure what ought means. I mean, because I'm a little quizzical on when we ought to do something, it means we can do something.
All right. So for example, would you agree with this? We ought to accept the conclusion of any sound and valid argument. So if I give you an argument which has the form if P then Q, P therefore Q, and both the premises are sound, they're true, then the conclusion follows, you are obliged to accept that conclusion as well, on pain of
as a reasonable person. Yes, I would have to.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of the same thing. If you give somebody an argument and they're just not accepting the conclusion, and it seems like both of the premises are like really self-evident, and they're just saying no, not even like I'll think about it later, or oh, that's a really good point. They're just rejecting it out of the gate. You're going to be frustrated. And chances are you've dealt with people who you felt you gave a really good reason for why you believe something, and they're just not having it. You're going to be a little more frustrated with them than, somebody who might not understand the points you're trying to communicate to them. Like there's a disparity there between someone who can grasp it, who you expect to grasp it, and they don't, versus, someone who just lacks the understanding too.
The more specific example that I would give is very often I try to challenge people that I can show you I can effectively prove evolution even to your satisfaction. I talk to a lot of creationists all the time, and what the common reaction is, if they take me seriously at all, mm-hmm. they will flee from that challenge like anything, like they're on fire. They will run away and avoid it. Mm-hmm. But in the few occasions where I've gotten somebody on, I've always had to preface this, that the conditions of this interaction is going to have to be a Socratic interaction. I have to get you to understand the basics and get you to acknowledge that you understand this before we move on to the next level. Okay.
Exactly.
So that means that I'm going to ask you a series of questions. You can ask me questions. I have to answer them too. If I ask you questions, you cannot repeatedly ignore any direct question.
Right.
If you do, then I'm going to just have to assume that you're trolling. If I've had to ask you the same question 3 or 4 times, and you duck and dodge or come up with something else, I'm just going to have to give up. I'm under no obligation to continue. With only one exception, in the last 25 years, of the dozens of people that I've gone through this challenge with, only one of them has actually proceeded to go through a couple dozen mutual exchanges as agreed, answering all questions and asking sincere questions. Because the only questions I get are the questions they hope I don't know the answer to.
Interesting.
And if they find out that I have the answer, then they don't want to hear it. They want to change and ask a different question and keep asking questions, interrupting my answer, keep asking questions until they find something that they think I can't answer. But they will not answer my questions at all. Period.
I get the frustration with that. It's really hard when you're just not dealing with an honest interlocutor, as opposed to somebody who is honest, who is trying to hear what you're saying, but maybe they lack the acumen to actually comprehend it. Like chances are, if you talked to me about evolution when I was 7, and I wasn't I just didn't understand it, then you'd be like, okay, he's 7, who cares? But when a 30-year-old guy who you're trying to lecture about it refuses to see your argument, you're understandably frustrated, and that's basically all the first 2 points are. If someone if someone ought to do something, if you think that they're obliged to do something, then it seems that they can do it. And it seems if we have obligations, then we should try to do them to the best of our ability, because that's what an obligation is. It's us trying to decipher what we owe one another and do our best to follow through on that. And that's all I'm saying with that.
One of the mistakes that I see that people in general make is that we often assume that other people are like us, that they think like us. Now, in my case, I always thought that if I ask somebody, why do you believe that? I'm expecting them to give me a reason.
Right.
And that reason should compel me to consider that, hey, wait, maybe they're right. But that's not what happens. And so I'm constantly accused of believing everything that I believe on faith.
Yeah.
I have to argue that that's not my perspective at all. And so the conversation that we have, that example person and myself, we just don't go anywhere. Right. They're constantly accusing me of things I don't do. They're constantly accusing me of the things that they do. And they won't listen to anything I say, or they dismiss everything I say. I had one guy tell me last week that he simply rejects the evidence. That you just come out and admit it. I reject you can't convince me because I reject the evidence. Okay, well, thanks for admitting that. And I've gotten a few admissions like that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hope, chances are if I had evidence contrary to my position, like even ones that I hold dear, then I would actually want to at the very least admit it and say, okay, maybe there's something more to this I'm just not seeing. But yeah, I'll even admit this is evidence against my position, even if I don't have anything right now that might answer. Like even just admitting that you don't know.
Yeah.
That's at least humble. And I would just advocate taking that approach. And that's
I like when people come, and I'm not being sarcastic here, I don't like this at all, but when people come up, when they say that they can prove God to me, right? Just like I said, I can prove evolution to them. They say they can prove God to me. Okay. And it very rarely happens that they do, but it has happened. Okay. Prove God to me. I'm listening. And then I get false premises. Right. I get statements of fact that are factually false. I get statistics that are all wrong. Or I get, because what I see as ubiquitous throughout religion, not just Christianity, but all religion, is the question begging fallacy.
Right.
And that's the one I constantly get. Well, look at the trees. Look at the sunset. And then the argument that compels no one ever, come on, man.
I'm not making a design argument. I'm not saying look at the trees. So far, I've only made 2 points, which I think we both agree on. If we ought to do something, we can do it, and we ought to fulfill our moral obligations to the best of our abilities. And I think the only thing that follows from that I think we could both accept is we can fulfill our moral obligations to other people to the best of our abilities. And that's the only thing I'm arguing so far. And
let me give you an example. And this is a painful one for me.
Uh-huh.
And it's going to be my soapbox probably for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I had a granddaughter
Mm-hmm.
who died of leukemia.
Mm-hmm.
And when I told my daughter that the grandbaby is dying and there's nothing anybody can do, that she has maybe a week,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to send her to Kissimmee, Florida. They're going to send her to Disney World, just try to make her, happy for the next few days, because then it's going to get bad, and you're just going to have to wait till she dies. Now, the problem with this is it's not like a TV movie. It's you have a child lying in the bed or next to the bed in the crib, in my case, and you're listening to increasingly labored breathing
Mm-hmm.
for days. And there's a point where the breathing is so labored that there's no mind there anymore. That that the oxygen content is so far gone that there's not even brain activity anymore. You know that this child has been, for the last day that she was conscious, she was completely in pain. If she's absolutely uncomfortable, she hates everybody because everything hurts and everything sucks. And now you tell this young woman that she has to listen to this labored breathing for days, that there's nothing anybody can do to make this any better.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to listen to that child breathing this terrible, terrible breathing until it stops.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would be immoral to slide on some anesthetic, maybe a bit too much. That would be immoral. Would that not be the better situation? I mean, for all involved, wouldn't that be better? I took a dog in to the vet. The dog had cancer. The vet says, there's nothing we can do about this. We're going to have to put her down. So they've already got the IV in. They hook up the anesthetic. We're all there petting the dog and hugging the dog. The dog is in his happy place when they roll that anesthetic on, and he goes to sleep, and it's painless.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the moral option?
Between those two, I would say put on the anesthetic. I don't see why.
But for whatever reason, the only kind of death the Bible doesn't endorse is the kind that would have mercy connected to it.
Out of curiosity, where in the Bible does it say you can't use an anesthetic on a dying person?
I said doesn't endorse.
Oh.
So where does the Bible endorse? The Bible endorses the death penalty for all kinds of crimes. The Bible endorses genocide, and the Bible endorses abortion in a number of places, but never does it allow for somebody to be allowed to be put to sleep. I mean, obviously, it doesn't say, but then the religious organizations have made this their moral pedestal. We live in Texas, and my wife doesn't want to die in Texas.
Right.
She wants to move to a state that allows death with dignity.
Oh.
We have seen people die here in Texas. Somebody have a stroke. They're catatonic. They're suffering.
Right.
They're in a hospital for 4 or 5 years, being unable to do anything except have somebody else wipe their butt. And that person doesn't want to live anymore. That's become clear. But we can't do that because it would be immoral,
right,
to bring that pain to an end. We have to know that there's no recourse, there's no way to stop this, there's no other, we just let that person suffer for years because somehow that's the moral angle.
Right. So a couple of things I just want to emphasize. One, as I go, nothing that I'm arguing for or nothing that I'm saying I believe commits me to the idea that euthanasia or anesthetic is good or bad. Because ethicists themselves disagree on what exactly our moral obligations to one another are. So if you talk to somebody like Peter Singer, he would pretty much agree with you. He would say, yeah, death with dignity, all good. If you listen to somebody like, I don't know, an Immanuel Kant, for example, who thinks that human life cannot in principle positively be killed because it goes against the categorical imperative of reason, he would disagree. Again, there are numerous positions, but I don't think you want to hear about the numerous positions of ethics. I think you're somebody who lost someone very dear to you, and I sympathize.
In an unnecessarily painful way.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to be the one to lay there waiting for the breathing to stop.
Right.
But I'm just thinking about how moral is it to tell someone that they're going to have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So moral decisions themselves there's always going to be incidences on the margins. So like ethicists usually cut their teeth at like these thought experiments, like a trolley problem, where you have on one side of the trolley, one person, on the other side, 5. Do you kill that one innocent person? And then you think, wait a minute, this is an abstract experiment. This isn't real life. That's not, those aren't actual persons you do have to deal with. And that's often the very difficult bridge between, you know, our thinking about ethics and us like really being in the situation where we have to witness someone go all through that. And
I saw this cartoon a few days ago. It was so funny. It shows the train car, and it has the switch and the 2 tracks. And then you have on the one side of the track, you have like one person tied to the railroad tracks in the old 1920s style. And on the other side, you've got like 3 or 4 people tied to the tracks. And there's a little girl you present this to. And so the little girl's solution was to connect the tracks on the other end so that the train hits both.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear though, that I'm not arguing for like any system of ethics. There are Christians who are consequentialists, I'm sure, who would probably even side with you. Like go to an Episcopalian church or a Unitarian church. They'd probably agree with everything you said. And I'm pretty sure there are those on the more conservative end of the spectrum who would disagree with you. But I'm not really trying to argue for like either side on this one. I'm just saying at the end of it, it's reasonable to believe that a God exists. I'm not even saying one does. I'm just saying it's reasonable to believe in that. And I'm just really
you're saying that, but there's no justification for it, because it is in fact not remotely reasonable to believe that a God exists.
But so far I've only given you 2 premises, and I don't think I've really
neither of which relate to the God.
Well, I mean, you build up. You don't just throw in everything at the beginning.
Okay, let's look at one more moral dilemma.
Could I perhaps maybe ask you a few questions, if you don't mind, because you brought up the moral dilemmas?
Sure.
So let's say that you're on the beach, you're walking. Again, I kind of like beach scenarios. So in this case, you see somebody drowning, but at the same time, you're wearing like a really nice suit, tux, shoes, and you have to ruin all of that just to save that person's life. Do you think you have a moral obligation just to do all of that, just to destroy your possessions to save one innocent person?
Those are material things.
Mm-hmm.
Those are. There's so many different angles I could approach from this. I was completely selfish. If I was completely selfish, I would still jump in the water. What?
Yeah, let's be objectivists. Let's go with
that.
Yeah,
I would still jump in the water for the bragging rights of having ruined my suit to save another life.
Just for the bragging rights.
There's just not a downside to this. Of course, the suit is going to get it.
Right. But part of the impetus though is your obligation to that person drowning. You would see an obligation to another person, right? As being part of your motivation. Like even putting bragging rights to the side, if everyone just called you a liar afterwards because they know how materialistic you are and how you would never do that, would you still do it for the sake of the other person?
It doesn't matter what other people say.
Right, exactly. I would agree.
Yeah.
So I just want to bring that up. And I think, and Peter Singer brings up this kind of thought experiment because he analogizes this to all the excess money we have in the West and in developed countries. People live much more exorbitant lives than they need to, and they could actually donate much more of their wealth to people in developing countries where, like the person drowning, that is a matter of life or death for them. But we don't do that. Most of us recognize that this stuff is for our happiness and the happiness of others, and we could always be doing more.
Yeah, I'm in a different situation in that I can't call it wealth. I'm far beneath wealthy, but I mean, what little money I do have comes from donations from patrons. Mm-hmm. So if I were to make donations on someone else's behalf, I'm literally donating someone else's money. Now, if I was making scads, if I
Mhm.
was making more than I need, then that might be another consideration. But I am not.
Right.
So,
And fair enough. I think you're in a very peculiar situation. But most people would. But the point that Singer would actually just make is we could just be doing a whole lot more than we are, and that goes to what John Hare calls like the high demands of morality. So all human beings are equal to one another. So when you think of how you should be treated, it's pretty much the same how I should be treated or anyone else, because no one's more special than one another. We're all equal in that regard. And at the same time, we could be doing a whole lot more to help other people. But unfortunately, there's a downside. And that downside is there's no guarantee of our own happiness in doing all that stuff. So instead of like that nice suit, think of something more simple, like, I don't know, think of a bad movie. Like think of seeing Braveheart and spending money on that. We discussed Braveheart in the beginning. So
I've seen many movies much worse than that since.
Let's say Men in Black 3. Like for the price you pay to see Men in Black 3, that's going to help someone a whole lot more than you or me. Like
God's not dead.
Like, okay, I think we should just liquidate those movie franchises and just use those for the betterment of humanity. Let's agree there. That's some theistic agreement. The point is,
what I wouldn't give for 20 minutes in a conversation with Kevin Sorbo. That would be so much fun.
How dare you challenge Hercules? But
dude, you were a god. You should know better than this.
Okay, that's a good. So. And that's one part of it. So we have these obligations to other people and the high cost of it. But at the same time, we also have a happiness motivation. So we have a utilitarian motivation, maximizing the wealth of others as our equals. So that's one duty we have. But we also have a duty to ourselves and others of motivating our own happiness. And that's a reasonable thing to do, to be happy. And yet we're caught in a tension with one another.
I've talked to a number of people who are working with atheists helping the homeless, for example. There's a number of different outlets of that.
Right.
And the frustration they all have is that in order to help the homeless in any given area, you need a collaborative effort because there needs to be an efficiency hotel, or there needs to be like a block of Soviet-style efficiency apartments, that people can be housed in. Somebody needs to donate more than any one person has to donate. So it has to be a collaborative effort. If you're going to take care of a homeless situation, that can't be one person going to solve that. That has to be an entire societal effort to do that. But then people get weird when you suggest donating or allocating any part of the communal budget or the tax budget to try to alleviate homelessness, because then now you've cued in a couple of words that just cause people to start salivating with anger when they don't know what those words mean, but they've been trained like Pavlovian dogs that they're going to respond to those words negatively.
Yeah, and that just goes to human selfishness. Like, how dare you give my hard-earned tax dollars to a bunch of bums? Like, yeah, that sickens me too. Not gonna lie, having programs to help the homeless is in their benefit as human beings, and that's just part of the moral demand for others. But you have that kind of happiness or selfishness kicking into people where it's my hard-earned money, it's mine to do with what I please, and that's kind of the second thing we have. And to be fair, that's not like totally bad. So for example, if you're in a situation where you donate a lot of money to help someone in the developing world with his family, people are going to congratulate you, but then tell them, yeah, but that money was actually going to my kid's tuition. Suddenly it seems less admirable, because we also see that we have obligations to like our family members and our close loved ones. And the thing I want to bring up with this is this tension between our own happiness and helping other people, like the motivation to help other people as others. So our obligations to them. And I want to say that on a naturalistic viewpoint, those things come into tension, and there's no guarantee of our happiness with good action. That's our happiness becomes, how should I put this? It becomes a zero-sum game where it's like if other people benefit, my own happiness dwindles. Now, there's a philosopher named Sedgwick who said, well, here are two responses we could give. One is like the psychological response. When I help other people, that's my happiness. When I see other people happy, I become happier. When a homeless person is given a sandwich and he can eat and has sustenance, I become happy as a result of that. And this was one way of reconciling it. But unfortunately, with that way, the people we tend to want to see happy the most are our relatives, our close loved ones, and people who are local to us and are just like us or in our own class and tax bracket or our own countrymen. And the second solution Sedgwick came up with was a theological one. On this one, God cares for both our moral happiness and for the obligation of other people. And he provides a security that we can still pursue helping other people to the best of our abilities, but we never lose out on the hope of our happiness spiritually. So we could have situations where people completely give up their happiness, but it's a very rational thing to do because they're never really losing out on what makes them happy. And I think in light of that, because there's a reconciliation of this tension between helping other people but pursuing our own happiness, theism provides a sort of way of reconciling those two budding obligations to ourselves and others. And moral action becomes less tense on that view. Whereas on...
I don't see theism as being relevant to that.
So, right. So do you think that theism wouldn't relieve the tension? Or do you think that there's another way to relieve the tension without going to a theological solution?
There's not a reason. Theology is irrelevant to the discussion. So theology doesn't achieve the goal that you say that it achieves. It has nothing to do with that.
So right. So you don't believe there can be, in principle, hope for eternal happiness?
Not if you think about it more than 10 minutes.
Oh, how so?
The most damning thing I can think of, it would be an eternity in heaven with the Christian God. Well, the Muslim God would actually be worse, but technically it's the same thing. But yeah, it would be just awful. Did you ever see the episode of The Twilight Zone called The Good Life?
Oh yeah, with the kid who can read minds, and you're just
there you go. You spend eternity with a telepath, and you better be thinking good thoughts all the time. And then so you're in heaven going, oh, it's good that you did that awful thing to those poor people, God. I mean, it's a real good thing. You'd have to do that forever and ever and ever, because there's no way to let it end. You can't get out of this. Billions and billions of years with your lips wrapped around the colon of that somehow inexplicably insecure God forever and ever. And there's no way to commit suicide. As Christopher Hitchens said, at least you can die and leave North Korea.
Yeah, so I think this is just a misunderstanding of what God is. So as I understand
a judgmental monster who will perpetually damn in insane torture, some completely over-the-top nonsense, anybody who disbelieves. So that the very topic of this conversation here, morality, is utterly irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
Are you talking? Wait, what? Sorry, are you sure you don't have God confused with my mother-in-law or something? Or okay, all right. No, so this is
so think about it. You mentioned that there were atheists who live admirable lives, who were charitable, good-natured humanitarian humanists. Okay, fine. And when they die, they will be skinned alive and burned and tortured and mercilessly beaten and brutalized. And then they will heal and then continue to be tortured forever and ever and ever. Mercilessly, the most over-the-top, insane, ridiculous, incredible torture you could ever imagine, more than anybody would ever imagine. It's just absolute horrible shit that just constantly happening to these people forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. But it doesn't matter how good they were.
Right.
There's no option anywhere ever that an atheist would not be damned to this horrible hell.
Right.
Every unbeliever will be damned. There's no provision that if you're good, you go to heaven, and if you're bad, you go to hell. No, you believe, then all sins can be forgiven, and you'll be allowed into heaven. You just have to ask for forgiveness, and then you will be forgiven, and you get to get into heaven. And you can sin all you want to. Just keep asking for forgiveness, and you can still get into heaven. Because I'm told all the time that the only reason I'm an atheist is because I want to pretend that God doesn't exist, that I somehow secretly believe that he does, but I want to pretend that he doesn't, because I'm so stupid that if I think that if I can't see him, then he can't see me. I'm as dumb as the bug bladder beast of Troll in that respect. And so I just want to continue sinning, whatever the hell that means. And so I want to pretend that there's no God. But if I was Christian, then I can sin all I want to, and all I have to do is ask forgiveness, and then I will go to heaven. But if I'm an atheist, then it doesn't matter how good I am, because the only sin that will not be forgiven is the sin of disbelief.
Right. All right. So a few things. One, you start off by saying, I think your main point overall is, for whatever problem that naturalistic morality might have, it seems by adding God on top of everything, especially the Christian God, then we're just introducing more problems than it solves. So,
well, I will still say that the Muslim God is actually worse.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna, defecate on other people's religions. Look. I think it's just a matter of charity. If you don't look into I'm not saying you haven't. I'm saying I haven't looked into something, so I'm not going to do that.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. So a few things, though. One, Christianity isn't necessarily committed to the idea of eternal conscious torment. There are Christians who are universalists who think that the punishment we undergo is actually going to be a temporary one. So they would say something along the lines of
why would you be punished at all?
Because
as an atheist.
I think I need some time to respond, because you listed quite a few objections, and I think it only merits some time to respond to all of them. So there are Christians who are universalists that don't believe in eternal conscious torment. They would just say that the spiritual losses you suffer or are punished are temporary. They're annihilationists who don't think that the punishment is forever and ever and ever. It's just the loss of eternal life. My friend Father James takes that position. As for the eternal conscious torment crew, they would just say that you are not actually punished for disbelief. You are just punished for violating your moral obligations to other people. And that's about it.
But the Bible doesn't say that. I mean, it quite explicitly, repeatedly says that you have to believe in this specific thing, or you're going to hell, and that's it.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, it only damns those who have sufficient reason to believe and then turn away from belief. It doesn't just damn everybody.
Well, then I'm safe then.
Yeah, you don't know that for sure. The second thing is...
Well, I've studied all of this as much as I can, and I know that there is no sufficient reason to believe in a God. There we go.
Well, let's just go through this conversation, and and we'll let the audience come up with their own decision at the end of it. The second thing I want to bring up is, in terms of the moral obligations you do violate, those are the ones you are punished for. The reason why people who are non-believers are going to be punished is because it's because they lack a means of making up for the debt they incur for their violations against other people.
How is there a violation? Well, if you simply don't believe, no,
that's not what I said. I didn't say there's a punishment for not believing. What I said is
the Bible does.
Can you give a verse?
Well, let me see if I can remember a chapter and verse for any of the examples I'm thinking of right now. I don't think I can give chapter and verse off the top of my head for any of the examples I have right now.
Fair enough. Like
too bad I'm not wearing. I have another T-shirt that gives like a list.
Cheat sheets.
Yeah, I should have worn that one. I could just pull it down. There you go. Right. Yeah, that you can only the only sin that will not be forgiven is the sin of disbelief. There's 3 different places in the Bible where it says that you cannot blaspheme against the Holy Spirit. Every other crime can be forgiven, but you can't do that. So if I say that I don't believe that there is a Holy Spirit, I don't believe any of this at all, well, then I'm done. I could become Christian tomorrow, but it didn't matter because I said it today. That's the unforgivable sin. Yeah. And the Bible is the absolute truth, which it obviously isn't. But if it was, then the fact that I blasphemed yesterday means that I'm doomed tomorrow, even if I'm Christian today.
Right. So the key thing is in this life or the next. So that final judgment on the denying of the Holy Spirit doesn't really go into effect until it's something that is held onto until the point of death. The second thing to consider is when you receive the Holy Spirit in baptism, then it's not something that can be denied to you any longer.
Okay, well, that happened to me at 8 in the Mormon church.
Oh, that's invalid.
Oh, of course, because
No.
you're a Christian who's going to tell me that they're not true Christians, and when funny that they would say the same thing about you.
Yeah, they can say.
And all of you are just dunking people's heads in the water because John the Baptist did it, and he had a cult out of it, and somebody decided that that was a good idea. But all of you are just pretending.
No, it's because they don't believe in the Trinity. So I'm not sure the dunking in the name of the Trinity works. If
there are other binitarian Christians and there are Unitarian Christians as well. Trinitarian and Christian is not synonymous.
That is true, but the point I'm just trying to emphasize is, in terms of the forgiveness of the Holy Spirit, that is not going to happen until the point of death. Any time until then, you're perfectly free to repent.
So what happens with my mom, who's dedicated her life to Mormonism? She's dedicated her life to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's for God to decide, not me.
It's what?
Oh, that's for God to decide, not me. I don't make judgments on people.
I'm not hearing the word. That's something, not you.
Oh, I see. That's something for God to judge, not me.
God to judge. Okay. I hear that an awful lot when posed the question, but if I don't pose the question, then people will volunteer the answer, and they'll tell me that she's going to hell.
Oh,
and my wife was raised by a Catholic mother and a Protestant father, and they both told her that the other part of the family was going to go to hell for that.
Sorry, that's just. I at one point in my life had a girlfriend who was Protestant, and we would argue about that back and forth. So it's just bring back happy memories.
My gosh, you mean you're Catholic?
Yes.
Oh, this just got better.
I hopefully
in Canada. You're Catholic in Canada?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been following the news of the last couple of weeks, huh?
Yes, I have.
Graveyards full of Indigenous children?
Yeah, and churches set asunder by arson.
I'm sorry, what?
And churches set asunder by arson. So basically,
yeah, I wouldn't doubt that as a response.
Yeah, all I know is I have ancestors who are Armenian Christian. We don't burn down mosques as a result of the genocide that went on against us.
Yeah, but that's not quite the point, is it? Graveyards full of Indigenous children is the point.
Yeah,
that somebody responded by burning down the useless building. That's nowhere near comparable to the crime of the graveyard of Indigenous children. And the fact that that's not just a few churches in Canada. The same thing happened in a number of other countries.
Yeah, as far as I understand it, retaliating by destroying a bit of property, one that is actually owned by the Indigenous communities themselves in certain places.
Do not mistake that I don't endorse vandalism.
Yes, I'm
just saying you can't compare burning down a useless building to the systematic murder of a whole bunch of children.
Yeah, started by the government of Canada and implicated in that other churches as well. But we often get singled out because, well, why not? No, it's true.
I'm sorry, that Catholicism is like the single most criminal religion I can think of. I mean, there's a lot of bad ones, but Catholicism has made quite a name for itself.
Yeah, with all those hospitals we open, all those schools that we open, and educating people.
And all those graveyards full of children, not just in Canada, but in Ireland and everywhere else. And all of the looted property that we've and Darth Ratzinger telling people in Central Africa that use of condoms spreads AIDS.
Yeah, this is coming from an American whose whole country is built on an Indian graveyard. I'm not saying I'm any better. Like, I'm in Canada.
I was just about to say, you're Canadian. you don't have a place to say anything. Yeah, I realize what a hypocrisy my country is, and it's a sad thing because I was raised to be patriotic. It's at a point where I wish that I could be patriotic, but in order to be a patriot anymore, I will have to fix things.
Mm-hmm. And that's a part of being a member of any organization. When there's criminal corruption or violation, you are a force to change things in that. I'm pretty sure as a member of American Atheists, if there is an issue in your organization, you work to change things. I believe you kicked out a former, what was it, President David Silverman for his sexual abuse indiscretions or something along those lines. And
yeah, well, I was not on the board at that moment.
I see.
I came on shortly thereafter.
Right, but I don't think it would be fair of me to say because he did something wrong that it poorly reflects everyone in your organization. I think that would be a hasty generalization.
But it is true that when anybody who's a noted face of an organization does anything wrong, it does. Jared still negatively impacts Subway sandwiches.
That is true. I can't eat Subway sandwiches anymore because of that.
Yeah, you know that Jared's favorite choice was, which do you want, 6 or 12?
Get out! No, no, no! Get out! Out! James, kick him out. Just okay. Well. Okay, so it seems like we have to wrap things up soon. I had a nice discussion with you, Aaron, despite the fact that we got into a bit of a yelling match at the end.
Did we?
Yeah, a bit. No, I didn't say like a huge one.
Well, if I contributed to
jabs.
that, if that was the impression left, and then I do apologize because that was not my intent.
I mean, it happens. Besides, I'm glad we got a few laughs in between the seriousness. That was actually the fun part of the discussion. So, James, thoughts?
I'm just trying to make sure I don't accidentally end the video early again. But I wanted to say I wanted to actually thank both you guys, Mr. Aron Ra for coming on, John Fisher. This was very interesting, the back and forth, very friendly. I'm going to mute for a minute and give you guys a chance to plug your channels, where you're at, what you're doing. And then I'll try to kick an outro. If not, we'll just all wave bye to the camera.
Beauty before age. So, Aaron, you can go ahead.
Aaron, please.
Aaron, somebody.
It's because you started drinking the beer, John. That was what did it.
That's it. It's Coors Light. This isn't even beer. It's 4% swill.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah. Mine is. I don't know which one am I doing. Oh yeah, this one. This is one. Mine is, there we go. 15.3% ABV.
I am such a lightweight.
All right. Well, so I am an atheist activist. It is what I do full time. And this is my only gig. So I need all the help I can get. If you want to support what I do, please go to patreon.com/ARONRA. And I thank you very much sincerely for your support.
My name is John Fisher 2.0. You can catch me over at my channel at Original Wind Productions. Also, I have a Twitter you could follow, John Fisher 2.0. That is the number 2, spell out .dot, and O as in the number 0. It's been a joy being on this channel and speaking to Aron Ra.
Yep. And once again, thank you everybody for watching. I apologize that I killed the other link. This was a conversation I've been sharing around everywhere, and now they're all going to an 11-second video of my intro. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and then maybe I will get better about actually doing these things appropriately. Once again, thank you to the guests. I can't do an outro, so it'll be a cold end. If I could hit the end button. All right, hang on 1 second, guys. I promise to end it.
You might want to cut this part out.